Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and this is Joshua P. Warren Daily. And in this podcast, I'm going to tell you how to travel through time. Now, I know what you're thinking. Joshua, have you done it? I'll get to that. All right. But there's some very interesting breaking news on this subject that I know you will find fascinating. That will satisfy the technical side of your curiosity. But here's what else I need to get into on this podcast that is certainly more important than ever. How to protect yourself spiritually right now. Trust me, you need it. Even if you don't think you do, and you probably know you do, you need it. And I'm going to give you a very basic technique that you can use to protect yourself, especially over the next, we'll say 6 weeks or so, as we lead up to the U.S. presidential election, and there is a lot of intensity, especially here in the U.S. I'm broadcasting from Las Vegas, Nevada, especially here, but trust me, it's a global society, and so what happens here is going to affect everybody else all over the world. So this should be a particularly interesting addition to the program. And as you know, this is going to be one of my last Joshua P. Warren Daily podcast per se, before I transition into the new podcast. I'm just waiting for the marketing folks to say, okay, it's launch time, and then boom, the new one will start. And at that time, I will come on here and I'll tell you exactly what the deal is and where to go and listen to the new updated podcast 2.0. You're really going to enjoy it. But don't unsubscribe to this podcast, Joshua P. Warren Daily, because I occasionally will be using this podcast for some like bonus material and behind the scenes recordings and some more specialized stuff. Also, before I get into this, and this really ties in nicely, I do have my new product 100% completed. I made one batch. That's all I'm going to be able to make, especially as busy as I am. This is the final manifestation product that I am creating for the year. And it's all done. I had to have some parts manufactured. That's all done. Everything in this whole batch is being shipped, and it's not a big batch. Everything is being shipped to Mobius right now, who, of course, is my shipper in North Carolina. And as soon as Mobius has everything, I will be releasing a webpage and telling you what this thing is. The timing is perfect because if you're into magic and manifestation, you're going to love this. And yet I am going to describe this as saying this is magic for people who don't like magic. And that's kind of an oversimplification, because what I mean by that is a lot of people, they believe in the power of magic and manifestation, but when they try to do it themselves and, specifically make something manifest or materialize, it just doesn't happen. They have problems with it. I studied the problems that people have, and boom, the light bulb went off, and I came up with what I believe is a solution. This is my new favorite manifestation toy. And sometimes I try to invent things that are very technical and practical, but I have the most fun inventing things that tap into a part of the mind, metaphysical things, magical things. And this is one of my favorite magical manifestation devices. I use it every single day now. As a matter of fact, I'm using it as we speak. This is a very cool one. So stay tuned for that. I'll be sharing that with you soon. That's why it's very important for you to sign up for my free e-newsletter, joshuapwarren.com, joshuapwarren.com. It's right there on the homepage. Takes you 2 seconds to sign up. Soon, everybody who subscribes to that is going to get a special treat. Okay, let's put it that way. I promise you. And, of course, just follow me through all the social media. You never know if the grid's going to go down or what the hell's going to happen. So, Twitter at Joshua P. Warren. You can find me on Facebook, type in Joshua P. Warren's Daily Podcast, all that kind of stuff. All right, let's talk about some time travel here real quick. Well, first off, here's a news story. I just actually received a link to this story today from Jason, who is an avid listener of this podcast, and he always sends me really interesting stuff. And so let me begin by just telling you about this breaking news, because it comes from Popular Mechanics. And which, you know, it's funny because Popular Mechanics has such a great reputation for being a nuts and bolts publication with a wonderful legacy, but also a lot of the writers there these days are very, very open-minded. I mean, they wrote a very flattering piece about radionics and wishing machines a few years back, which is linked up at wishingmachineproject.com. And the thing is, the writer could have come in and said, I'm going to be a skeptic, and this is all just a bunch of fucking bullshit. You know, they could have easily done that. But they, the writer said, hey, what do I know? And let me open my mind. And that's what real science is about, opening your mind and admitting, like, no, we don't know everything. So let's just see. Anyway, here is the story. Thank you for sending this to me, Jason, from Popular Mechanics. The title is A Student Just Proved Paradox-Free Time Travel is Possible. I'll read that again. A student just proved paradox-free time travel is possible. And the writer then kind of jokes, now we can all go back to 2019. The good old days, right? So here is, now this is a little complicated. I'm going to try to make it easy on your ears. That's part of my job here. So let me just start by reading this, okay? And this article is by a writer named Carolyn Delbert. And it just came out today. And she wrote, in a new peer-reviewed paper, a senior honors undergraduate says he has mathematically proven the physical feasibility of a specific kind of time travel. The paper appears in the publication Classical and Quantum Gravity. University of Queensland student, and by this I suppose I guess they're talking about Queensland, Australia. I haven't confirmed that, but that's what I would presume. University of Queensland student Jermaine Tobar, who the university's press release calls prodigious, worked with UQ physics professor Fabio Costa on the paper. The paper is called Reversible Dynamics with Closed Time-like Curves and Freedom of Choice. I swear to you, I'm going to make this as non-boring as possible, all right? It says, they found a middle ground in mathematics that solves a major logical paradox. So when people talk about paradoxes in time travel, it's, the main thing people talk about, like the classic example is the grandfather paradox, that, if you go back in time and kill your grandfather, well, then you can't be born. And so, how do you get to be born if you've killed your grandfather? How does that work out? And of course, in the movie Back to the Future, they play with that, where Michael J. Fox goes back, and of course, he's having to make sure that his parents get together, because the less likely that becomes due to his interference, then the more he fades from a future existence. So, but let's think about this seriously for a minute. So they are saying here that the math behind all this is complex. Yeah, you think? Can you imagine? The math is complex, but it boils down to something fairly simple. Time travel discussion focuses on closed time-like curves. Okay, so they call that a CTC, a closed time-like curve. And again, I think the best way of putting it, and not that I'm an expert on this paper or anything, but think of the loop of going back. I did write about the paratemporal loop hypothesis, but you can read about that in my book, The Secret Wisdom of Kukulkan, which is in my curiosity shop. Anyway, and they say that an entire scenario, regardless of what happens with time travel, still has a causal order. So here's what they're saying as an example of this. Here's an analogy. Quote, say you traveled in time in an attempt to stop COVID-19's patient 0 from being exposed to the virus. However, if you stop that individual from becoming infected, that would eliminate the motivation for you to go back and stop the pandemic in the first place. This is a paradox, an inconsistency that often leads people to think that time travel cannot occur in our universe. Logically, it's hard to accept because that would affect our freedom to make any arbitrary action. It would mean you can time travel, but you cannot do anything that would cause a paradox to occur, end quote. See, that makes sense. This is like I say, that's the grandfather paradox. But now here's what they're saying. That, instead of like being what some call the butterfly effect, that they're saying there is actually another way that this can work. And they have the math to prove that this is, in fact, how it does work. Will work or does work. Probably does work, because if it's ever going to work, it's working right now, right? Because it's time travel. If it's happening anywhere, it's happening now. Here is what the new data is telling us. Quote, in the coronavirus patient 0 example, you might try and stop patient 0 from becoming infected. But in doing so, you would catch the virus and become patient 0, or someone else would. No matter what you did, the salient events would just recalibrate around you. Try as you might to create a paradox, the events will always adjust themselves to avoid any inconsistency, end quote. So that makes sense in a very weird way. It makes sense. I mean, that it's like, it goes back to really the idea of destiny and fate, doesn't it? It's like, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And even if you travel back in time, you might change the way it happened. You might be able to replace the circumstances of how it happened, but it's still going to happen because it is part of a larger plan, a divine plan, a design, call it what you will, predeterminism. So they go on to say in the article, while that sounds frustrating for the person trying to prevent a pandemic or kill Hitler, for mathematicians, it helps to smooth a fundamental speed bump in the way we think about time. And it also fits with quantum findings from Los Alamos, for example, and the way random walk mathematics behave in 1 and 2 dimensions. I'm sure you know what that is, right? So anyway, the point they're saying here, at very least, this research suggests that anyone eventually designing a way to meaningfully travel in time could do so in experiment without an underlying fear of ruining the world, at least not right away. Let me add on there, unless the world's ruined anyway. So they go on and they give more, there's more detailed information here, but I think you get the idea. Again, that's Popular Mechanics, Caroline Delbert. Interesting piece. All right. So what I take from that is, if this is correct, and you have to preface just about anything you say with that, but especially theories on time travel. If this is correct, well then it really shows us that there's no reason to fear going back in time if you can do it. In my paratemporal loop hypothesis, which I will not get into right now because you have enough on your mind right now. but I was basically postulating that maybe you can, maybe beings from the future can go back and alter the events of the past and change the future. But they're saying, nope. If you go back and you squeeze one side of the balloon, the air is going to just pop out the other side. You can't displace what's there. You can only rearrange it. That's my take from it. So look, I don't know if any of this is accurate, but it does give you something to think about. And it does make me think more about how probable that some form of time travel is. And, I'm not sure that humans are ever going to be able to physically time travel in this plane, in this quote unquote dimension. I have no doubt that when we leave our bodies, then there will be some type of time travel experience relative to what we are comprehending right now. But I'm not sure that within our plane that we are capable of like getting in a machine and going back in time. But I do believe, however, that we are certainly capable of observing things that have happened in the past by slowing time down somewhat. And so let me give you an example here of what I've been working on. And if you're new to this podcast, I have been experimenting with time travel technology, if you want to call it that, for a couple of years now. And this is in part because of a gentleman named Ronald Heath, who lives in California. He is an engineer who created something called the DT meter, or differential time rate meter, which is a device that allows you to detect whether or not time is, slowing down or speeding up by a fraction of a second. And I was the first investigator to be given the opportunity to take one of these out in the field, and I did find a time anomaly using the device just north of Las Vegas on my way to Area 51. And the great thing about the DT meter is that it gives you some feedback, because you might be experiencing time warps all the time, but you don't know it because they're so slight. Or maybe there is a technology out there that naturally produces a time warp, and we just don't know it because you don't have a DT meter sitting there to tell you. So now that we have this thing called a DT meter that is available to, consumer and civilian level researchers, you can now go out and start testing different things. And I mean, again, it could be so weird. You might sit down next to a Tesla coil and say, all right, it's not doing anything. And then you take it and you put it next to a Philly cheesesteak sandwich. You say, oh my God, Philly cheesesteak sandwiches manipulate time and space. I mean, we can't really tell what's going to happen. So that's why, good researchers need to get themselves a DT meter and run around and just start checking out things and seeing if time slows down a bit. Because if you can find a way to take a natural time distortion and magnify that, I think in reality what we're talking about is the ability to look back in time at least a few seconds. I mean, that would certainly be a start, wouldn't it? I mean, imagine creating a machine that could fit on your coffee table, and you turn it on and you say, hello, and 1 second later you hear hello, not an echo. That's sort of how it would start. It'd be something that basic, and then you just keep getting it bigger and bigger. And then eventually, like computer technology, it would get huge and then be miniaturized. And suddenly everybody would be experiencing some form of time warping. But the idea is not necessarily that you're going to be able to get into a machine and go somewhere else, but more like that you would be able to see what happened in the past. And if we got good enough at doing that, we might be able to dial it all the way back to see dinosaurs and stuff. I mean, that's something that I did talk about on the recent Gaia show with George Norrie, Beyond Belief. So in my experiments, I've been taking some of the things I know about gravity and space-time and all that, and playing with it, using the DT meter as feedback. And I want to share with you what I've come up with, because you might think, well, Josh, why would you share all of your valuable, information that you've been working on? Most of the work that I do, I don't do to hoard up selfishly, because I know one day the Men in Black could come and I could disappear, or civilization could break down, and shit happens, guys. There are wars, and I'd rather just put the information out there and say, I have not technically achieved this yet, and you'll understand why, but I am working on it. But even if I don't achieve it, let me give you some thoughts. And if you're the first person who gets out there and achieves it, well then, fantastic. I hope you will give me a little credit for putting maybe an idea in your mind. But here is sort of the main thing for you to think about. Scientists always tell us that gravity, which is obviously something that distorts this thing called space-time, they tell us that gravity, well, let me put it this way. Space-time affects light. Okay. That if space-time is intensified or bent or warped in a certain way, then it will also warp light. And that's why astronomers have to account for that. And that's why it's so interesting to study a black hole, because the gravity is so intense that it warps space-time, and therefore it warps the light. So there's this relationship between gravity, space-time, and light. And so if we know that space-time has an effect on light, then maybe we can flip the coin here and say we can use light to affect space-time. It reminds me of traditional broadcasting, as I've said before. And broadcasting, like a radio show or something like that, you have two antennas. One of them broadcasts the signal, and the other one receives the signal. But you can reverse those roles, and you can turn the receiver into the broadcaster and the broadcaster into the receiver. They can switch back and forth. They're just, again, two sides of the coin that are playing a different but equally significant role. So if you can affect light with space-time distortions, you should be able to affect space-time distortions with light. And this is, and I'm not just like saying I have invented this concept. There are a lot of people out there who talk about this kind of thing. As a matter of fact, I've talked on this podcast about a professor, Dr. Ron Mallett, from the University of Connecticut. And he has speculated about this thing called a ring laser, which would basically be, a spinning ring of lasers. And how that a spinning ring of that alone, if you had a spinning ring of extremely high-powered, extremely intense lasers, that spinning around might actually create some kind of a distortion in space-time. Like if you held the DT meter sensor up to it, then you would detect just, some type of a small difference. And technically speaking, that would be a time machine. If you could create a machine that would technically slow down time by a split second, you have invented a time machine. And from there, it's just a matter of, perfecting it and doing what else you want to with it. And so let's think a little bit about the things that we can access as humans that seem to have a connection with space-time. Well, obviously, light is this big component. Light is such a weird thing. I'm not even sure what to call light, honestly. But light is so representative of how we see and interpret everything around us. And yet it can be fairly easily manipulated by lensing materials, glass, water. And then when you bend it, you can even make things invisible, because you can bend it. And when you do that, sometimes if you put it through something like a prism, well, then the light breaks down and it shows you all these other little colors inside of it. So light is a very complex thing. That's why we use it as the universal constant. Travels 186,000 miles per second. E equals mc squared. All that kind of business. Light is so interesting when it comes to time because supposedly when you look up into the night sky, many of the stars you see up there do not even exist anymore. They burned out eons ago, and all you are seeing is the light that is just now reaching Earth. That's how far away those things are. They are gone. You're just now receiving the light from them. So that is a form of observational time travel, just looking into the sky and seeing these stars. You're looking into the past in that regard. So we know that, even though we can't quite wrap our minds around precisely what's happening with light, we know that that's somehow got to be connected to this time machine concept. But the second thing that is, I believe, the most underlying element of how everything in the known universe works is the concept of spinning. So, and of course, everything spins. You have these orbits of electrons in an atom, or you have galaxies spinning, and within those galaxies, you have planets spinning, etc., right? We know that everything spins. And when you spin things on our planet, which is also spinning, when you spin something, it takes on this bizarre force that is almost like its own miniature gravity. Look at a gyroscope. If it's just sitting still on a table, it's doing nothing. But you spin it, and all of a sudden now it has this power. It stands upright. You can balance it on anything. You can tie it to the end of a string, and it's pulling the string. It's got its own power. You take a ball or something like that hooked to a string, and it's just hanging there doing nothing. But then you start spinning it. Now all of a sudden it's trying to pull out of your hand. You know that when you spin things, it creates this incredible force. That's why they take astronauts and they spin them around to see how they react to these gravitational type forces that are created by spinning. So let's take the concept of light and spinning and put them together. And again, it takes us back a lot to what Dr. Ron Mallett was saying about, well, maybe you can just spin some high-powered lights around enough and twist up space-time a little bit enough to create a distortion. Maybe you can. I have tried that, and I have not had success thus far, but you may need much more powerful lasers than I currently have. And, I had a laboratory in North Carolina, but I had to close it down because I'm rebuilding a much bigger, better laboratory here in Nevada. There's a lot more space here, and the climate is much more in line with my work doing electrostatics experiments. It's very nice and dry here. But it's going to take me a while to get everything up and running the way I want it. But, okay, so we need light. We need some spinning. But what else might be included? Well, let's think about one of the materials here on Earth that we have created that is very, very good at bending light. Fiber optics. And I've talked about this sort of thing here and there, bits and pieces over the years. I've corresponded with some listeners about it. And, a coil is a very interesting thing. Coils are the basis of electricity. And, of course, transformers, electromagnets, all these things involve coils. It's easy, however, to think about a Tesla coil, the power of that coil creating lightning, so to speak. So, in a nutshell, what if we combined a coil with spinning with high-intensity laser light and created something like this? Now, just try to imagine this. You know what a tuning fork looks like. It's got one handle, and then it has what looks like a U-shaped part on the top. So it's two prongs on top of a handle, and you strike those prongs, and it gives you a nice tone. Poo. I play with them all the time. Well, imagine if you had something like a tuning fork, but instead of those two forks, you had two coils of fiber optic wire. And each one of those coils of fiber optics had a very, very powerful laser shooting through it. And then you take the whole damn thing and you spin it as fast as you can. What you're going to have are two coils of light spinning like a gyroscope. And I think what may happen when you do this is there is almost what you can imagine as a polarity that will be created between the two spinning coils of light. And when that polarity is created, it will open into a space between those prongs, which is similar to a wormhole or certainly a portal of some kind. And within that space is where time will be distorted. So who knows by how much? If you created something like that and you put the DT meter in the middle of it, I would imagine you would see some distortion, at least, of it may not be a full second, but I mean, some kind of a distortion that shouldn't be there. And then from there, you just keep getting bigger and better, and you say, okay, do we need more intense lasers? Do we need more coils on the fiber optics? Do we need to spin this thing faster? I mean, you're shooting in the dark, and you're experimenting with trial and error. But I believe that if we get to the point to where we can technically pull this off, then again, all you need are two coils of fiber optic cable with powerful lasers shooting through them and the whole thing spinning on a fixed shaft. Now, if you are listening somewhere out there and you say, I'll be damned, I have all of this shit in my garage, please go out there and get to it. And maybe you can be the inventor of the guy who created the first, or lady who created the first time machine. But if you want to do that and you've got some of these supplies and you're ready to go, you can always contact me, and maybe I'll even come and visit you and bring the DT meter, and we can see what we can do. So, you can always contact me through joshuapwarren.com. I read every email to the best of my ability. It's impossible for me to reply to everyone, but things are getting so ridiculously busy between now and especially the end of October leading up to Halloween that I may not even be able to read half of my emails, but I do my best. I do try. So I believe that is how you could create a device that would warp space-time. I haven't done it yet, but I think it can be done, and it will be done. And if it doesn't happen soon, it will happen one day. But I really believe that that is the way to get started on this project. So, wouldn't you like to possibly travel back to 2019, huh? Who knows? I even did, a little comic about that where a guy goes stumbling into a bar and it says circa 2019, and the guy looks like some kind of caveman, and everybody turns and says, "Where are you from, mister?" And he goes, "I'm from the future." I had that created back when, we were really all on hardcore lockdown. Here in Las Vegas, at least, they just opened or reopened for the second time bars a little bit. Like Lauren's birthday was yesterday. We had a great time. We went out and enjoyed ourselves, but they still won't let us do conferences and live events, but slowly but surely we're getting there. So I should have an announcement soon about the new date for my conference that had to be postponed. So thank you for being patient regarding that. This will be my last live conference ever, and I think you can see why, because it's too unpredictable to do these things. But in this year, the year 2020, it is very important for you to start thinking about shielding yourself spiritually, especially if you have been having a particularly tough time. Everybody's been having a tough time, all right? Everybody has. So there's a song by Joe Vitale, "Everybody is going through something," and that's true. Everybody's going through something. So if you're having a shitty day, don't just take it out on somebody else because you don't know what kind of day they're having. It's that kind of a year, but there are people out there who want it to be that way. They're intensifying things. They're trying to create chaos. They're trying to bring in darkness and disruption and break down our society, and they're really just outright just evil and insensitive forces that they want to watch the world burn. These are people that if they could push a button and just blow up the planet, they would do that. And those people have always been around, but boy, right now they're given much more ability to organize all over the world than ever before, thanks to the internet and technology. So what you need to do is make sure that you are shielding yourself. And if you've been having a particularly bad time, you want to listen to what I'm about to tell you. It's very, very simple. And this is something really effective because there are lots of, let's just call them demonic forces. I hate to use that word because I'm not some, overly religious fundamentalist type of guy, but let's just call it what it is. I mean, these evil, destructive forces are, it's like some serial killer. You try to figure out why the person is killing people, and at the end of the day, you're just like, this person just must have had a damn demon. I mean, like, there's no rationale for it. That's what I mean when I often talk about demonic behavior. So anyway, it's time for you to shield yourself, because even if you've been doing okay, don't take that for granted. Don't wait for something to go haywire. Here is the simplest thing for you to do. This is going to sound a little bit superstitious. Fine. Who cares? What harm is to be done? If you don't believe in this, who cares? It's just a fun little exercise. But why not give it a shot just in fucking case? All right? Just think of it that way. So there is, of course, this relationship between all things in the universe, whether they are to humans physical or non-physical, or whether they are spiritual in nature or electromagnetic in nature. We live in a universe, so everything is connected at some level. And one of the most interesting things that we have in the mix here are crystals. Crystals somehow act as what we call transducers, meaning they're able to take one type of energy and turn it into another type of energy. So, for example, a quartz crystal can turn mechanical energy into an electrical current, or an electrical current can turn a quartz crystal into a vibrating mechanical power source, right? That's a transducer. It just changes the way energy passes. And whatever energy is coming into your house over the next, especially month or two, may end up being negative. And as long as you're producing positive energy in your house, well, you have nothing to worry about coming from you as the source. But what you want to neutralize is what bad stuff might be coming into that positive space you're creating. So you want to make that space around you as sacred, if you want to use that term, as possible, by changing the way that energy functions. And the simplest thing to do is to use a crystal called salt. I'm talking about any type of salt. Table salt works. Typical, iodized table salt is just fine. You can use Epsom salt. If you're somebody who collects crystals and gemstones, fine, you can use those as well. But otherwise, let's just stick with the simplest thing. Get yourself some salt and go up to your front door and just somewhere around the door. Doesn't have to be right in front of the door because you don't want to slip and fall. But maybe, to one side or the other, around the hinges or whatever, but near the door, not directly in front of the door, but somewhere around the door, out of the way. You want to at least sprinkle some salt. You might even want to put a little mound of salt. If you have pets, then you might want to even put it in a little bag or something like that to try to prevent them from eating it. But it doesn't really matter how you position it. You just want some small, some parcel or some small sprinkling of salt right around your front door. And as you put it down, I want you to look at that salt, and this is very important. You say this out loud. I am humble, and I am protected by God. And then you go to every other door and every window in your house, especially the exterior ones. It doesn't hurt to just do it wherever you can, but especially do it around your windows and your exterior doors. Same thing. You put the salt down, you either sprinkle it or you put a little container. Either way is fine, or whatever crystal you have. But when you do it, you take a moment and you say, I am humble and I am protected by God. I am humble and I am protected by God. What is God? That's for you to decide. God can be whatever positive protective force means to you. Nobody can tell you exactly what God is. But we know God is going to be your protector in this case. You could even, if you want to get really wild, you can even go around your house and put a circle around your house. The more salt that you have placed around your house at entry points, however, the better. Just every single time, I am humble and I am protected by God. That will help you. That will shield you. That can save you a lot of suffering and heartache. And also, any confusion that may come along the rest of this year as to who's right and who's wrong and who deserved this and who deserved that or who didn't and all that kind of business, I just want you to remember this one thing. And this is the thing that I'm going to repeat as much as I can, because this is the ultimate way to keep it all straight. There's only one real rule to having a good life for everybody, and it is simply do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you can do everything you do in your life with that at the forefront of your mind, then you will go to your grave with a rather peaceful mind. It's easy to forget that and become an animal and fall into that primate what I call the Wookiee-like state in my book, Use the Force, A Jedi's Guide to the Law of Attraction. It's surprisingly easy to do that. But you've got to try. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You might even want to put that on some notes around your house or anywhere else that will remind you to view the world that way and to behave that way. You know, my literary agent, Lisa Hagen, posted, I guess she tweeted the other day, one of these memes that said, people who wonder if the glass is half empty or half full miss the point. The glass is refillable. And, which is actually a very hopeful thing. Because I told you previously on this show that somebody else put a meme where they said, the optimist says the glass is half full and the pessimist says it's half empty. And in 2020, we say, this is pee, isn't it? But no, think about seriously what Lisa tweeted there. People who wonder if the glass is half empty or half full miss the point. The glass is refillable. So keep your priorities in order. Don't make bad decisions that will come back to haunt you, because no matter what bad things may happen to you this year, you can always go back, and it's never too late to start rebuilding until you die. You know? So just keep that in mind, that if right now you're having a tough time, go back to the drawing board. Start from scratch. Get creative. But stay hopeful, because all throughout history, people have gone through tough times. So I have an update for you. Actually, I have a few updates for you before I wrap up this podcast. Guess what? Mr. Mobius, he has been testing this new night vision. And a lot of you have emailed him wanting to see if this night vision was going to pass the tests. And he has some good news here. And I'm just going to read some of it. He said, when you get the PVS 7s or the PVS 14s, those are the really fancy ones that run between $2,500 and $3,000. But he says these new ones that he has for $499 a pair, these new night vision goggles that he is providing, he said are a fantastic value, that he was able to watch satellites passing overhead. He says, they're not quite as good as a $3,000 pair of night vision goggles, as you can imagine. And as I read his email, there was a lot of technical stuff in here. So if you really want to get into that with him, you can do it. I'm not going to do that right now because it's kind of boring. But he says, I'm glad he's into it, but he's really into it. I don't even know half of some of these terms he's using, but anyway, he said these see deep into the IR spectrum and will allow you to see with great light gain, both visible light and invisible IR. He said the gain on these is about the same as the third gen night vision we sold in 2007. That's pretty amazing. He says the best bonus is these come with a 2-year warranty for the buyer. And so he said if you get one of these for $499, that he is going to be available to answer questions and consult with you on how to use these. So he said, he's ready to rock and roll. So if you have already been in touch with Mobius, go ahead and email him and tell him, send me the invoice, and you can pay it through either PayPal or with any debit or credit card or whatever. You can work it out with Mobius. He's going to be personally going through and making sure you have the best pair of night vision for paranormal investigation, looking for UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, you name it. or you could just use them if you're a hunter or you're doing security. I mean, for $499, it's just, to pass his test. I mean, that's a pretty good thing. Or if you're just now hearing about this for the first time, you can just email me, contact@joshuapwarren.com, contact@joshuapwarren.com, and just put the word night vision in the subject line. That's all you have to write is night vision, and I'll forward that on to Mobius, and so he can get you lined up to receive these as long as we have them. A lot of people are gobbling up night vision right now because everybody's in survival, doomsday, apocalypse mode. But as long as he's got them, he is ready to take your order and get you a pair of $499 night vision goggles. And that's pretty kick-ass. So thank you for that update, Mobius. You know what? It's funny because I've been getting my new studio all set up here for the new podcast, because as I've told you, the new podcast I'm doing, it's still going to be, me and a microphone, but it's going to have a new name, a new format, new consistency. It's pretty impressive. You'll be amazed at how much more polished things will end up being. And I almost started to take a picture of the new studio, and I thought, you know what? Oh, I don't want to do that. Part of the joy of listening is theater of the mind. And I know a lot of these radio guys, they put a webcam in front of themselves. And there are a lot of people who like just watching a guy sitting in a studio talking. But I don't know. I think it takes some of the magic away. And by the way, I can't sit down and do a show. I have done that for years. When I did Speaking of Strange, I would just sit down in front of a microphone with a bunch of papers and talk into a microphone. I can't do that. I am on my feet. When I do this show, I have to be on my feet, and I'm always moving around. I'm playing with stuff. I'm looking at stuff. I mean, I just have all this energy coming out of me. So my studio does look different than everybody else's. I assure you of that. But even though I don't want to take a picture, I have some amazing artwork in here, including one that I don't want to even describe. It's only for me. It's gigantic. But one thing that I do want to tell you, I just hung up a few days ago, which I absolutely love. You may remember I told you I have a guy, a listener in Oregon. He's an artist named Craig. And he got one of my wands, and he held it at his forehead toward his third eye he said he could only take about 30 seconds of doing that. It was so intense. And then he immediately painted this incredible epic picture. I tweeted this painting a while back, and it's sort of a dreamscape. It looks like this mountain with rocky cliffs set back in sort of purplish clouds, and all this sort of fog is seething around it. And then in the foreground, you have some, maybe a little brush and some other craggy outcroppings of rocks. And I don't know. It looks like you're viewing some mystical place in the distance. And what it reminds me of especially that I like is, I'll never forget the first time I laid eyes directly on Puerto Rico. I was on a cruise ship. I'd been hired to do a presentation on a cruise ship by the A&E television network. And I had a balcony outside my cabin, and we were pulling into Old San Juan, just a little bit after daybreak, right after sunrise. And I'll never forget being out there early in the morning on the balcony, and it was so foggy I couldn't even see Old San Juan. And then it was that beautiful combination of the sun being at the right place and the mist starting to die down. And all of a sudden, as we silently approached the island, I saw this big, crisp, stark form of this rocky old fort called El Morro. that just sort of emerged through the fog. It was like the most clear, striking, sharp thing I'd ever seen, just appearing from that fog. And I mean, it sends a chill down my spine just to think back on what that looked like, approaching it from the ocean. And I just sort of experienced this surge of energy from all of the pirates and the sailors and the explorers and everybody who for hundreds of years had, after being out at sea for God knows how long, finally made it close enough to see. Dun, 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 here is this fort, El Morro. Amazing thing. And so when I look at Craig's painting, it reminds me of that. And he sent it to me. Okay, he sent it to me as a gift, and so I'm looking at it right now, and it's on a nice, durable material, and I just love it. Every time I look at it, it just takes me away. It transports me somewhere. So thank you again, Craig. That is so cool that I can stand here in my studio, in my office, and I can look up and I can see a painting that was done by a wonderful artist who was inspired in some way after putting one of my wands up to his third eye. What a cool thing. I got a pretty cool situation here in my life. Someday I'll just maybe give you an audio tour of all the things that I have around me. Maps and autographed items and minions and bizarro gadgets. Yeah, I'll do that one of these days. Okay, so also, I have my new book coming out. I'm just waiting on the art at this point. I hired the best artist I know. This guy is a genius, and he is doing the cover and the artwork. As soon as he is finished, it goes straight to the printer, and then I will tell you what the new book is. And after that, now we're all, I got the product coming out, and I got the book. So here I am. I'm in my new studio. I just poured a glass of my new wine. I make my own wine here. Lauren and I made a batch of this strawberry wine that's kick-ass. So it's like I got my own winery here. I got my own potato chip factory. I can make my own potato chips here. I'm not even joking. I have a really cool setup here. So yeah, one day I'll tell you about the studio and how I make wine and how I make potato chips and all these other things. But it's like I have a little it's like a little estate here, a little world I've created for myself that, I don't know, for some reason it just needs to be bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. I keep doing crazy ass experiments. So you've got to stay tuned because I have a lot to share with you very, very soon. And the only way to really, again, make sure you get the first news is to, you need to follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren. You never know when social media is going to get locked up, though. You know how that goes. And also be sure, and this is the most important thing, go to joshuapwarren.com and sign up for my free e-newsletter there. It takes you 2 seconds. If you do that right now, you'll get a free digital good luck charm. And also soon I'm going to be sending you a link to a very special item that you can make yourself at home. And I will let you know what my new manifestation product is and everything else. But you got to sign up there at my website, joshuapwarren.com. While you're there, check out the Curiosity Shop. See some amazing things there you won't find anywhere else in the world. We are selling out of stuff all the time. So hopefully if you see something you like, it'll be in stock there in the Curiosity Shop. But while you're at joshuapwarren.com, click the link to this podcast right there on the homepage. It's called Joshua P. Warren Daily. You can subscribe through various means or just follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren, and I will usually tweet when a new one is available. So remember, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious, and I will talk to you again soon.